It was like looking around, no one else was offering a service like this. Whether even in the conventional world, it was extremely rare, it was a niche, and in the Islamic world, non-existent. And so I felt that now this was an amana, you know?
Yeah.
So that at that point, I knew that I couldn't just walk away. The methodology is not secret,
Okay.
you know? It's not. Finding good companies cheap is the value school of
Yeah.
investing. It's one of the most popular schools of investing. What's the gem, what's the secret is we now have people who are, in a way, voluntary slaves.
Yeah.
Not really voluntary because the environment has created it such that you can't have a basic human need, which is shelter over your head and security in that, and to own the roof over your head,
Yeah.
without locking yourself away for 30 years of working. Yeah. That is a type of, forced slavery that we've put people into, the current economic system has forced
Yes.
people into. How do we free these people from that slavery? Hajj is getting more and more expensive,
Yeah.
like Hajj inflation, right? House inflation. This is like inflation in ibadah, right?
Yeah.
I had this weird rule in my house when I started earning
Mhm.
first job. And we weren't saving a lot, and my wife was like, we need to save more. I said, okay, for every dollar we save, we have to give away one.
SubhanAllah.
That was my rule.
MashaAllah.
I'm like, you're
Yeah.
only gonna keep something if you've given the equivalent
Yeah.
away. And
Amazing.
the environment has pushed us into selling the best years and hours of our lives
Yeah.
to earn something, and then we live for weekends.
Yeah.
If that, and weekends just when you're catching up with housework and
Yeah.
things like that, and with the kids. Like, that is not the life the Sahaba lived,
No. No. Not at all.
right? So how do we get back there?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Rehan.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I know we talked about this, but today I'm not going to be sitting across you as your co-founder, but rather as a storyteller, because what I want to do is tell stories about ummatic changemakers and those building legacies. I really want to tell your story to the people that are listening, inshallah. And, I've mentioned in a previous episode that, every story, every journey, every goal has a beginning. And it's always good to start at the beginning. But with you, I'm going to flip the script, okay? Inshallah, and I'm going to kind of fast forward ahead a little bit to these super secret, super powerful algorithms that everyone's heard about, that are doing some wonderful, amazing things that a lot of people think are too good to be true. But there's a term that you use about giving people an unfair advantage. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that term means and how these secret things are working?
Sure. Subhanallah. So, in every journey, there's a moment where you should know, especially as a startup founder, you should know you have something to offer the world that very few people have. Now, for me, I didn't set out for that. It was more so that I just set out to figure out a problem using the tools that were already available, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I was trying to solve a very particular problem, which is, how do we make Muslim charities financially sustainable, right? How do we implement 100% donation policy? That was the problem statement that I started with.
Yep.
I didn't know anything about whether I was going to build an algorithm or any of that, right?
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was that I start my journey. I start studying really deep study, right? Macroeconomics, accounting, business valuation, these kind of things. Once I've decided that the stock market was a place that I wanted to look into, that really deep study began. And so I came across a number of, people who have run hedge funds successfully, people who've made incredible returns above market. And I started studying their work. And I came across then this kind of school of investing called quantitative value. And quantitative value is really like looking at Warren Buffett's school, but doing it in a mathematical way. Right. And so I thought, wow, there's other people, there's proof that it can be done. So there's a lot of literature on that, right? I'd recommend, if people have the time, to read Tweedy Brown's, What Works in the Markets paper. They're a fund manager that's over 100 years old. And so they documented a whole bunch of formulas that have worked over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? And so those formulas I had a look at, and then eventually I got to the point where I said, well, do these work with a Sharia lens, because they just sort the entire stock market.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I dug a little bit further and started to apply those principles, but not the specifics, not the particulars, just the
Right.
overarching principles, where they're trying to find undervalued companies in the stock market going into early 2020, I come across a few eureka moments,
Right.
right? Those moments where like, uh-oh, why does this work? Right. And what you're unlocking is basically, it's like finding, like a nugget of gold in your backyard,
Yeah.
right? You looked, you didn't know if you were going to find anything. Chances are you weren't.
Yeah.
But you just dug and you looked in the right place. Maybe you didn't give up after, 999 times.
Yeah.
But that, that 1,000 times you
Yeah.
found something where
Yeah.
someone else would have given up. And so when I found that, this methodology, this process, that's what an algorithm is. An algorithm is a set of procedures. That's all it is. This procedure of looking at the stock market to find companies that are undervalued works over 20, 25 years
Yep.
of the stock market history that I was testing over. And I thought, okay, now I can really construct a diversified portfolio out of this. And at that point, it was like looking around, no one else was offering a service like this. Whether even in the conventional world, it was extremely rare, it was a niche. And in the Islamic world, non-existent. And so I felt that now this was an amana,
Yeah.
It's like Allah uncovered something for you, looked, but Allah uncovered something. And so that at that point, I knew that I couldn't just walk away.
Yeah.
We had to get it out there.
Yeah.
And really, that's when, early on 2019, we were seeing some very interesting results. And I think, both you and I, looking at those results, being kind of engineers by trade, we know how to look at data. Looking at those results said, there's something statistically important here, something that we can build for the Ummah that could actually solve the problem that, wanted, which was for the charity sector. We were both volunteering at the same charities and helping out. And we thought, you know what, we should probably put this out there. And then we, came up with a name and registered a company, that story, early 2020. But, the 2 years prior to that, we used to catch up. I used to show you, my spreadsheets and the performance and stuff like that, and we were together, we went through that journey. We were just like, oh, and you knew as soon as you saw it, because said, Rehan, you're onto something.
It wasn't a nugget. It was a gold mine. In my view, you found a gold mine.
So that was what it was, So I think we both I shared it with you when I trusted you and we had time. And, and then COVID came probably, in that journey, like COVID came at such an opportune moment. Because we didn't know COVID was coming. We registered the company early 2020. We knew we had something. Yeah. And, that's where, the secret algorithm kind of was born. It's not, the methodology is not secret. Okay. It's not. Finding good companies cheap is the value school of investing. It's one of the most popular schools of investing. What's the gem, what's the secret is methodologies of defining what is value. Yeah. And then removing what are value traps from that. So value traps are, you're finding a company that looks undervalued, but that's justifiably so because its future is negative. So the stock market's just discounting it early because people want to get out. Yeah. Versus companies that are heading in the opposite direction. The future's bright, but they're undervalued.
They've been
mispriced.
Right.
And so those are the ones that you have to kind of weed out. So as part of building our algorithms, they kind of err on the side of companies that look like they'll have a bright future, but have maybe a temporary kind of moment where the market's mispricing them. And so that's really in a way, the open secret, right?
Okay. Yeah. So it is something that maybe someone else can do, but for me, being able to do it consistently, getting the returns that you've been generating live for the past 5 odd years, again leads me to, I guess, my original question again about the unfair advantage, right? Like you're doing something that you're saying is an open secret people can replicate, but no one's been able to do it for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know why, other than if they are, then they are keeping it a secret.
Okay.
Right? So, I don't know of many Sharia compliant hedge funds, but if they are out there, then maybe this is the same thing that they're trying to do, right? Okay. We've always been from the community. So for me, it was never about gatekeeping this just for the wealthy or just for, the clients that are going to come who are already wealthy, and we can help them make a lot of money and make ourselves a lot of money.
Yeah.
That was never where we started. We always started with the charity sector,
Yes.
helping the community. So for me, the first logical use case was actually this unfair advantage
Yeah.
shouldn't be locked away behind some gate of minimum $100,000 sophisticated investor,
Right. Yeah.
just mega wealthy or high net worth individuals. I wanted it for the charities, because they're the ones who are helping the most disenfranchised,
Yes.
and two, for the common man who should have a path out of being compelled to work a 40-hour work week,
Yes.
when maybe his life requires him to work a 30-hour work week or a 20-hour work week, or to work in an industry that he's more passionate about.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But
100%.
unfortunately, that's not where the money is.
Yeah.
And so I think, in a way, as part of our deen, one of the greatest acts a person of wealth can do, which the Prophet ﷺ encouraged a lot, was to free slaves.
Yeah.
Was to free slaves. Now, in the modern day, we don't have slaves to free, but we now have people who are, in a way, voluntary slaves.
Yep.
Not really voluntary, because the environment has created it such that you can't have a basic human need, which is shelter over your head and security in that, and to own the roof over your head,
Yeah.
without locking yourself away for 30 years of working. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a type of, forced slavery that we've put people into, the current economic system has forced
Yes.
people into. How do we free these people from that slavery?
Wow.
How?
Yeah.
And so we need tools, solutions, things that give them an unfair advantage, because Muslims and Islamic finance is now, like, it's still in its early stages. Islamic finance and the solutions that we have for, whether it's financing big purchases, homes, businesses, all of these are scarce. And when they do exist, they're expensive.
Yep.
Yeah. Which means now you've got the double whammy of the economic system, which is creating inflation, making people poorer every year. The gap between house prices and median income is increasing. We're finding people are just, whether you're conventional or not, right? Whether you're looking for Islamic financial solution or conventional solutions, you're being forced into this kind of slavery. As a Muslim, your cost of capital is typically higher, because those pools of capital are smaller, right? Where you can get access to what we call, wholesome wealth that's untainted. We're not taking it based on interest, because that's against our values. And so you've got that double negative happening to the Muslim community. Those who fear Allah, either they're just never going to buy a house, but their rent's going to go up every year forever. Right? How are you going to support your retirement if your rent's just going to keep going up? Say you don't buy a house, your rent's still going to keep going up, and you're going to stop working one day. How are you going to support yourself? Right? So what's your exit strategy? And so how do we free people from that kind of slavery? We need an unfair advantage. For all of us, I think together, the unfair advantage it's not a luxury. I'm not saying I've got something for the ummah that is a nice to have. I'm saying we must have unfair advantages to undo the headwind, or to fight the headwind that we've got, which is much stronger. Right? And so you need stronger propellers. You need, to use that analogy, you need a stronger wind in your back to be able to overcome the unique challenges of our community. And I think, these algorithms, these methodologies of investing, if we can unlock them for the ummah, for whether it's their retirement accounts, whether it's their, day-to-day savings plans, whether they're saving for Hajj, whatever they're saving for, those goals. Hajj is getting more and more expensive, like Hajj inflation, right? House inflation. This is like inflation in ibadah, right? Inflation in ibadah. Look at gold, right? All of, mashallah, especially we're from the subcontinent, our wives have gold. It's normal for them to have gold, but every year it becomes more and more expensive, right? Because we're not, if we paid zakat in gold, it would be the same price. We pay zakat in fiat. We pay zakat in Australian dollars, US dollars, UK dollars, rupees. And if we're paying zakat in that, then we're being oppressed by this kind of central banking based monetary system. And so now our zakat becomes more and more difficult to pay. It's not because, it's not because we're getting poorer. just by default, but we're actually, because we hold gold, which is hard currency,
Yeah.
which is real money, you know.
Yeah.
When we pay zakat on that, we pay on it from the stuff that we earn from, and we don't earn in gold.
Yeah.
We don't earn in in hard currency. We earn in soft currency, and so that mismatch we're seeing now greater and greater and greater. That the ummah does need solutions that outperform gold, right? Even
Yeah.
just in your investments, so that next year hopefully you're paying more, not
Yeah.
less. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
eventually we'll get to a point where we have to start selling that gold, and so that's really where we're at. I think we have something special. It's an amana. That's the only reason why I left my career, 20 years in tech, definitely paid better, and so the reason we need to do that is because if Allah gave it to someone else, I would expect them to do the same.
Yeah.
So that's why we're here.
Awesome. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah.
Now, after fast forwarding, I'm going to rewind way back to like a prequel,
Okay.
right? Before I get to your HalalStocks' origin story, which you've alluded to a little bit, I want to get to your origin story and talk about the woman who raised you. Recently on my WhatsApp, something popped up about the Azra Ahmed Award. Very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I know how some of those values that she lived by, what this award is about, is now kind of ingrained in you, which has led you down this path to finding the solution.
Allahu Akbar. So my mom, rahmatullah alayha, she passed away, just as right in the middle of the startup accelerator that we were in 2020, August. August 2020, my mom passes away. I'm right in the middle of the Heart of Design Accelerator with Peter Gould. And it was a very devastating moment for all of us. I know you were right there next to me. As we were holding her hand, and she breathed her last. But she, in that pitch deck that we produced, right? I by the end of it, we had to produce a final pitch, and Ammi was part of that pitch. I included because she was someone who was always helping people. She was someone who, just growing up, she had so much empathy. She would always, like, if would be walking down the street and she'd see like some lady or some older lady who's carrying groceries, she'd be like, Rehan, go and
Yeah.
go and help her, go and carry her groceries. I used to be so shy, I'm a very shy person, and I didn't want to do it, but it was because I was just I'm not used to talking to strangers as a young kid, very introverted. But she'd encourage me to go do that. If I didn't go and do it, she would go and do it.
Wow. Yeah.
And so my mom used to help a lot of women escaping abusive relationships. They were somehow would get her number.
Yeah.
Right. She was kind of part of Pakistan Australian Women's Association, which was an association helping migrant women from Pakistan. And she would get her number handed out through different networks that she was, to just completely random people who would say, maybe this lady can help you. And so my mom would always receive calls throughout the day, in the middle of the night. And then she would be like, Rehan, this lady, we need to, get some groceries for her, some nappies for her children, whatever. Can you drive me? My mom didn't like driving in the night. She was quite old. And so in the night, I'd definitely go with her. I'd stay in the car. She'd go and take the groceries. And this was just part of life, growing up. And that intensity didn't reduce, especially towards the end of life. We found more and more people. So Ami was always helping people. I remember there was we have a corner store just around the corner from, and there was a young Indian boy who started working there. My mom used to go there for groceries. It's run by a Lebanese family, and so she found out that he was there, and so one day she cooked some some salan and that some home cooked food, and she gave it to me in a container. Said, Rehan, go take it to the boy in the grocery store. I'm like, why? And we don't even know him. And she's like, you don't know, when the last time was he ate from his mother's cooking.
Wow.
So that's what she thought when she saw him. That this person has, it makes me a little bit teary that she thought about him like a mother would think about him.
Yeah.
And that's just one anecdote. Me throughout her life was always finding people to help. We used to walk. So there were these, these small kind of dollar stores.
Yeah.
And so we'd walk by these dollar stores, and Ammi would go in, and she'd go in and buy something. She'd say, Rehan, find something for one of your kids or whatever. And there's just random things in there,
Yeah.
like these stores that don't make a lot of money. And they're not really known for a lot of things, but they
Yeah.
just have containers and food things and odds and ends. She used to love going into these dollar stores, and I used to watch her like just go and buy something out, and I'd observe. I'm like, we already have this, it's not
Yeah.
something that we actually need,
Yeah.
and but she would use that as an excuse to help this person earn halal,
Wow.
so she'd go in and she'd be like, you don't know how many customers he had today. Everyone walks past. You're gonna go to Woolies, you're gonna go to Coles, you're
Yeah.
gonna go to Big W, you're gonna get whatever you want,
Yeah.
but this is a little store in Arncliffe, just that, has food containers and tennis balls and all these random little
Yeah.
things, right? No one's going to go there for anything particular. But my mom would make a point to stop in, say salam, ask them how they are, and then buy something, And I know we don't need it, but
Yeah.
she'd do it to because tijara, like this person is trying to earn halal,
Yeah.
and do it in a dignified way,
Yes.
right? And if you don't help that person, then obviously the next step is they're going to be, seeking charity or begging, right?
Yeah.
If a person is trying to earn an honest living, and maybe, their business isn't running well, whatever, if you can help them out, help them, but in your heart, make the intention. That's what I learned from her, that even in trade, even in buying and selling, like you can have a charitable intention.
Yeah.
You want to elevate that person. You want to dignify that person, and that's like business is supposed to do that. And so even like the other day, that brother who still runs that store, he drove past. He always asks me, and say good things about Ammi. He knows
Nice.
she rahmatullah alayhi. But she touched people. Just these are people everyone would overlook.
Yeah.
But she didn't overlook them.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of person that she was. So for me, watching my mom do her charity, she received a disability pension because both her knees weren't well. She had to have knee reconstructions and so on. And so she received a disability pension. She would spend all of it on charity. She would give that to people who needed it more.
Amazing.
Right? And so that was just her selflessness, But I think, being raised by someone like that had, a significant impact in me, when going through my corporate career. One, always trying to be charitable. I had this weird rule in my house when I started earning first job. We weren't saving a lot, And my wife was like, "We need to save more." And I said, "Okay, for every dollar we save, we have to give away one."
SubhanAllah.
That was my rule.
MashaAllah.
I'm like, you're
Yeah.
only gonna keep something if you've given the equivalent away.
Amazing.
And so that was just, that's inside knowledge. But I'm just saying that was because my mom raised me a certain way, and because I saw what she did. And so she was always a giver, and so I always felt guilty keeping.
Yeah. Wow.
And so if we fast forward to me leaving my corporate world after like 10 years in corporate, saying I need to do something more with my life, because these are the best years of my life, right? 20 to 30, like you're at your peak mentally, physically. And I just felt that I was just giving it away I was at IBM at the time. And although I was doing well at work, that's not what I want to go back to Allah with.
Yeah.
Oh Allah, I was a great employee at IBM. It's like really entire life, everything that Allah gave you, and that's what you could come up with. So for me, it was like I felt that push to you need to go and do more, and then that then inspired me to leave, to join Muslim Aid, go through that journey. I wasn't, being from within the inside of a Islamic charity, knowing exactly how it works, exactly how the capital flows through, exactly what the problems are, and so on. Getting first-hand experience of that then led me to kind of that next chapter in my life, which was like, well, how do we then solve these problems? Because at IBM or as a technical consultant, all you're doing is you're asking customer, figuring out their environment, figuring out what their pain points are, and solving it. That's your job.
Yeah.
And then they pay you for providing them a solution. But in this case, what's my client? My client's the Ummah,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
But do I have anything to offer, right? And so for me, that was that point, that turning point. We're going through the Muslim Aid part of my career, which was short but very, very impactful, to figure out, okay, this is a sector that deserves better solutions.
Yeah. And that's where you saw the problem. You
Yeah,
had to move to the charity sector to see the problems they were facing in order to build that solution.
absolutely. Yeah. So that was, it wouldn't have happened in any other way, right?
Yeah.
And then the problem then evolving to a solution. Coming from a tech background, the stock market makes a lot of sense. So much data, so
Yeah.
much history, so much testing you can do. I'm someone who's actually quite risk averse, so I need to, I need to test something before I,
Yeah.
put money in,
Yeah.
and also put other people's money in. So quantitative solutions, or what we call quantitative investing, which is a form of systematic investing, allows us to build a track record without waiting another 10 years,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, okay, this worked over the last 20 years. Let's run it for the next 5.
Yeah.
And then once we got to that point and it still worked, you're like, well, I've run out of excuses to talk myself out of this.
Yeah.
We have to do this.
Yeah.
And so that's where we got to, right? But behind it all was obviously Ammi's dua. She was always making dua for us, man. Like,
Yeah.
and hopefully part of her legacy is, inshallah, what we can build. And,
Inshallah.
the sadaqah jari that,
Yeah.
if inshallah we can do before we leave this world, definitely, Ammi would have a share in that,
Inshallah.
because, she planted
Yeah.
so many seeds in throughout our lives in doing that.
Extremely, extremely inspirational. Some of those things I knew, some of them, unfortunately, I don't know why I didn't know some of those stories. But subhanallah. And I think, obviously we both agree whatever happens for a reason, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose you. You've already answered my next question, because it was about, most people see a problem, but they see it as a problem, they walk away, they don't really work towards building a solution. But that corporate background from IBM, where all you did was build solutions for people, and then you being planted in that charity where you saw the problem and you feel like, I know you looked for the solution, you couldn't find it, and which is why you built it. But subhanallah, again, I've answered my own question, because just seeing your journey, you were the only one. You followed those dots looking back, and now we can connect them to say, that's why he went through that journey to be able to build what we have here today. One thing you touched on before I kind of move forward a little bit was around, your mum helping victims of domestic violence a lot. And a question was sent through to me about, I guess, financial independence or financial empowerment of women. It seems like it's not a topic, particularly in our community or in the Ummah, that's talked about that much. But with the solution you're offering, yes, we start off at the charity sector, but how important is it from a female perspective to be financially literate and then working towards that financial independence?
I think it's very important, especially in this day and age. I don't know why it's the case, but there is a significant representation. I can only say with regards to the subcontinent, that's where we're from. In that community where women end up staying in relationships that are un-Islamic. He, her husband is not fulfilling her rights. He is, oppressing her in many different ways, and the only reason she stays is because the alternative is that you're going to be homeless on the street. No safety net. These were women who, these aren't women who have the safety net of the, of Centrelink or something like that.
Yeah.
These are usually there's spouses of international students who've come in. They're doing some studies. They came in through some kind of, and they're visiting, but the man is not fulfilling her rights. And so if what our community would do, what Ami would do, bring them in, and then there's a network of women. I know you're part of it as well, where we would donate and support these people when they're in that really critical period, right? Part of it was legal support, like legal in the sense that these women become very vulnerable and they can lose their children, right? They have young children, usually very young children. They can lose their children if, facts or the institutions figure out that, look, this person's struggling to the point that they can't feed their own child. They will take the child and put them in foster care. And so now she's lost her husband, who I'm sure she loved, but he didn't do right by her. She had to escape, whether for her life or for the life of her children and their safety. Now she's lost her child. And many of these cases, it's just one after the other. And so these women are extremely vulnerable when they get to that state where they're reaching out to a stranger.
Yeah.
You know, you
Yeah.
have to think about what they've been through. And so now they're at this point, and then they pick up the phone, they call Ummi, and Ummi is just like a mom to them, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, if they, then as a community, we try and empower these people because
Yeah.
they themselves need some time to get onto their feet. And
Yes.
so many of them eventually, mashallah, enter the workforce. They like,
Alhamdulillah,
we
yes.
know these
Yeah.
women, mashallah, you know, and they remember like that, you know, you were there for them when they needed it. Now you see them, mashallah, starting new families, working, you know, doing well in the
Yeah.
society. And so, you know, so many of them, actually, I remember when after burying Ammi, you know, we put her in the grave. I came out of the grave. I was like in a devastated state. I was crying. And I climbed out of the grave, and you know, all our family was kind of in one direction. And then there was this group of women,
Yeah.
you know, there to my right, and I didn't know them. As I walked past, one of them approached me, and she said, today, you know, she was speaking on behalf of all the sisters there. They were looking at me. They had tears in their eyes. I had tears in my eyes, and they said, uh, we know that you lost your mother today,
Yeah.
but she was our mother too.
Wow.
Subhanallah, and they were all there crying. So it was a huge group of women. They got the news somehow that she passed away because she's buried within hours of
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah, same day,
Yeah.
7 a.m. She passes away. Rahmatullahi alayha. We bury her at like 1:30
Yeah.
on the same day. But they all came, when they heard. So that just shows how much like she meant to them.
Yeah.
But we need solutions for women to offer women that one align to their values. So one thing that I've kind of learned a lot with regards to speaking to female clients is they care more. There's a lot more care about what the values are with which you invest,
Yeah.
right? Obviously the Sharia compliance, but also things like BDS, not contributing to genocide and not profiting from it, which many investment funds are doing. Those values resonate more with them than the returns, right? Because when we talk about returns, that's something that entices maybe more males to come on, because that's what they ask about. The women always ask about the values. It's like, how do you screen? How do you, and that's the main question that they ask. And so for us to be able to kind of be no compromise in how we build our portfolios, I think gives them a lot more peace of mind and ease to start that journey. And to invest. But we need to do more. We need waqfs, we need to help women, especially to stand on their own feet. The work that you do, mashallah, I know, like you're a director at House of Sadaqah. The work we do with House of Sadaqah, we're also helping them grow their foundation, their investment fund. But they've got the campaign right now is sleeping in your car, right? You spend a night in your car, you feel, because those are real cases. Those are real cases that come through House of Sadaqah. Muslim women sleeping in their car for 5-6 months.
Wow.
With their children. In our community. Like, how is that happening? How is that how are these sisters of ours, being left to fight for themselves like that? And that's really the network that, my mom, your mom, our community was trying to make sure that there's a safety net. For these women. That should never happen. And so I think investing is something, because you don't know what changes. Women go through many phases in their life. And in those phases, they definitely should have financial independence or financial support. And so if we can empower them. Often women have more discretionary wealth than men, especially in our communities, because what I mean by discretionary wealth is the man has to, he's supporting his mom overseas, his parents, his siblings, he's getting his sister married, he's looking after like multiple families, especially if he's here in the West and he's sending money abroad. But what that allows women to do is save. And allows them to save, and they shouldn't just be saving in fiat, or because that's just inflation is just going to destroy it. Even if what they did was buy gold, which is in our portfolios, we have gold. A good diversified portfolio, then she's going to be able to. What if her husband passes away? What if those sources of financial support, he loses a job, you go through this stress as a couple, and if she's strong in that circumstance, then she'll be able to carry. Right? Why? Like, look at the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He when he says about Khadija radiallahu anha, when when no one believed me, she believed in me, and when no one gave me wealth, money, right?
Yeah.
She gave me money,
Yeah.
and so she was wealthy, and she was his support when he needed it, and he was a wealthy merchant as well, but
Yeah.
quite successful. Excuse me.
Which is, I guess, a part that we don't really hear about is that he was a wealthy merchant. I know he was a successful merchant, which is the story that's been told, but the wealth part is often left out.
He chose to give, right?
Yeah.
So he was a wealthy philanthropist, like in modern day terminology. He was someone who always had empathy for the people who were less fortunate, who were doing it tough. And so he was, everything that the Sahaba donated really went through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he was the distribution point.
Yeah.
Everyone would come to him with their needs,
Yeah.
It reminded me, like, obviously he was also, sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a role model for my mom. Like, these are people who came to her because they knew that she would help them somehow. And it wasn't because she was wealthy, but it was because she was the means through which wealth or other support could reach them.
Yeah.
So everyone would go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because he was like their closest friend, right? The one that you could tell all of your problems, right? And so the Sahaba radiallahu anhu who were wealthier would give it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to distribute.
Yeah.
Because Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never took sadaqah, right? And he never took charity. And so he would never want to sleep knowing that there's a coin of charity in his house. He would find someone and distribute it. So he's a wealthy philanthropist in that sense. He's a capital allocator, meaning someone who's managing the wealth of others.
Yes.
Be it for charitable purposes or with Khadija radiallahu anhu for profit-making purposes.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So both. And he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was also Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. He's the trustee.
Yeah.
So like people would deposit their wealth with him, and then they would, they knew that he would never usurp it. He would never, so he was the safekeeper of wealth as well.
Even the people that didn't like him.
Even his greatest enemies, who were plotting his assassination at that point in time, right? That phase of Asira just before the Hijrah. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling Ali radiallahu anhu, he's placing him in his bed, said, "You're gonna be here, right? They'll come, and this is so and so's, and this is so and so's, and this is so and so's. That you can give this wealth back to those people because I have to leave. They're trying to kill me." He's going to Medina. Right? The Hijrah is about to begin. So, I mean, even at that point, they knew that he was trustworthy, even if they wanted to assassinate him. You know what I mean? Like, that's just crazy. But, subhanAllah, that just speaks to the role that he played in the economy of Mecca, right? Think about that. In the economy of Mecca, he was like a bank, because that's where you kept your gold and your wealth for safekeeping. So, because he was a trustee, he was a wealth manager. He was a merchant and a trader, very successful one, right? And so, and he's also himself like a waqf, because he's distributing, or he's a manager of a charity, right? In that sense, that charitable funds, Sahaba give it to him, and he knows who needs it best,
Yes.
And so, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's doing all of these roles as a central figure in the economy of Mecca and Medina, right? Whether it's pre-Islam or post. Right. And so that's an aspect of his life, I think, that is not talked about enough, right? Is the sunnah of being a capital allocator, a wealth manager, a deposit taking institution. Like all of these things, like he lived. It was part of his life, and a role that he chose to take. Right. In his life. And he lived in zuhud. So yes, we know that he didn't have many clothes, he didn't have many. All he left was his water bowl, right? And so we know he didn't keep many personal belongings. He was pure zahid. But that wasn't because he chose poverty. It was because he chose generosity. There's a difference.
Yes. Wow.
There's a big difference. Yeah. Between choosing to be generous, but having access to enormous amount of wealth. Right? He had the wealthiest merchants of Medina at his feet. Right? He was offered to be made the king of Medina. Not about wealth. It was the fact that he didn't choose to spend it on himself. He preferred other people. Ithar. Right? So that is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Extremely wealthy, extremely financially adept,
Yeah.
and understood economics and markets to an extremely high, like he was a genius from an economics perspective. The way that he, you know, we can go on for hours with regards to how he developed
Yeah.
the markets in Medina, how he changed the regulations in Medina, what he, you know, encouraged when it came to choosing a career, right? Even career
Yeah.
advice from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is like encouraging the ummah to do tijara, right? 9/10 of sustenance is in tijara. This is a saying
Yeah.
of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. What's he doing? He's teaching people the reality of the economic world
Yeah.
and saying you need to be in business.
Yeah.
If you want to earn well, you want to be wealthy, you want to have an impact,
Yeah.
you need to be in business. And one of the greatest things that he used to encourage, like I said when I was speaking earlier, was really the freeing of slaves, you know. And I think in our modern age, to help believers reach, you know, what is liberation capital, and it's something different for every single one of us.
Yeah.
That enough money that works for you so that you don't have to work for money. You work because you know you want to achieve certain something in the world.
Yes.
Allah gave you a gift. He gave you a certain superpower. Every one of us has these. For you to activate that in the world, that's why we were sent. To not have to compromise or put that off because I need to afford a house, you know, or a roof over my head and just put food on the table, right?
Corporate slave.
That's what it is. It's, you know, it's voluntary form of slavery, or the environment has pushed us into selling the best years and hours of our lives to, you know, to earn something, and then we live for weekends. You know, if that, and the weekends just when you're catching up with housework and things like that, and with the kids, like that is not the life the Sahaba lived.
No, not at all.
Right. So how do we get back there? And so part of our mission is trying to give people some kind of roadmap, give ourselves a roadmap to get back to the lifestyle of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, you know.
Amazing. There was something you touched on a little bit earlier when you were talking about the solution and how women, you know, they look at the BDS, the value side of it. But I guess you tick all the boxes with the algorithms, the way they perform, the performance is there, and you're not compromising on any of the values with, you know, ESG, BDS, Sharia compliance, all of that. There's still, I guess, a few myths around the solution that you've built, you know, floating around, particularly within the Ummah around, you know, is investing in stocks halal? How is it different to gambling? You know, and then when you talked about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, again, maybe a stigma, whether it's in my mind or broader community around deen versus dunya. How do you kind of take? He took both and he moved forward with it, whereas a lot of people think that you're chasing wealth or you're doing ibadah in terms of deen. You're not, you know, even though both you can do both and they are one and the same, the way Rasulullah live those values. But just going back to some of those common myths, are you able to quickly bust them, because we're running out of time? But these are some of the common questions we do get, like, you know, why stocks, how stocks, how are they halal? Just those basics, please.
SubhanAllah. Yeah. So one thing we need to understand, what is the stock market, right? The stock market is a place where businesses raise capital. So they raise money to grow their business. And they do that by selling parts of the business. It's a place where partnerships are formed. That's what the stock market is. And so when you acquire the stock of a company, you become a business partner, you become a shareholder of the company. You're an owner. And so as an owner of the company, you have rights. You have rights to dividends. If that company goes under or it gets liquidated, you have rights to the proceeds from those liquidations. You have rights to vote on the directors of that company. These are all real world rights. One. So you are becoming a part owner of a business when you buy a stock. And that's like, in the business world, like that's as business as you can get. We're not talking about lending money. We're not talking about rent-seeking activity. We're not talking about, you know, anything that in that asset class, right at the heart of it, is genuine businesses. The other thing about the stock market is because the regulatory regime is so strict, they have to publish their accounts. Those have to be independently audited. Those have to be publicly disclosed. And any material changes to the business, once it's a public company, must be disclosed to the market. Must, by law. And what that creates is a market that's information rich. And because you can trade these stocks, you know, between 9 and 5, so to speak, during the workday, it's a live auction that happens. Which means price discovery for companies is one of the most efficient processes, meaning people have the price will carry so much information that it will allow you to figure out whether this is a good business or not, good acquisition or not, good investment or not. And those are very, very aligned with Islamic principles of business.
Yep.
Transparency, honesty, and the uninterrupted movement of the spot price, right? Which is what a free market is. Prophet ﷺ once in his life there was like really high inflation.
Yep.
And so the people asking about Prophet ﷺ, fix the price, put a ceiling on it to let things go. And he refused. Wow. The markets, right, are like in a way sacred, right? It sounds strange to say this, but the markets are sacred because what they're doing is that they're balancing between supply and demand. And so for there's some commodities out there that also you have a live price, right? The stock market has a live price. And any mechanism that opens up a market that is that efficient with absorbing information and then turning that into a new price, right, is something to be encouraged. Because what happens when you have price manipulation, right, which is what happens in certain markets which are closed, private markets often have price manipulation and inefficiencies of knowledge. The information there, the information is hidden. So there's there's market inefficiencies which people exploit. In those kind of inefficient markets, what's happening is the true price of something to society is either very rarely reached or never reached. And what that means is either the seller is getting oppressed because the price is too low, or the buyer is being oppressed because the price is too high, right? Because of information asymmetry or opaqueness. So what's beautiful about public markets is they reduce the opaqueness of what you're buying. Which means it allows the market to figure out what's the optimal price. And that means the least number of people are oppressed when that transaction goes through, right? And so free markets and the protection of the spot price from manipulation is something that the stock market does extremely well and better than many other markets. So those are reasons why I think it's a very, very wholesome asset class. Now, we have to make sure that the companies that we're investing in are, not doing anything that's non-Sharia compliant. They're not using forms of finance that are, un-Islamic, for example. So all of those controls, right, get put into place. So we screen them out in order to make sure that we're investing in companies that would, would pass those tests. We can do that because they're public. Yes. The information's there, open, independently audited, and required by law. It's how markets should be. It's how markets should be. And so that's why I'm a fan of public markets, because of the transparency and so on. Is it gambling? Just because a price moves on a daily basis, that's just because it's an efficient market. That's not because, that's not the reason why something becomes gambling in Islam. Something becomes gambling when transfer of ownership itself is not guaranteed. So you pay for something and you don't know if you're going to get anything in return. That's gambling.
But buying a company.
You're buying a company, you get the shares. That you've got it, right? If you're in another like CFDs, now these are things that get marketed a lot. If you're trading CFDs, then yes, that is like gambling because you never actually own the asset. You're just betting on the price moving. You didn't acquire a thing. You close you open a contract, you close the contract, price difference happens. So it's not gambling because you're actually acquiring a real interest in a real business in the world that's doing real things and doing real trade. So that is the question.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. I think, myth busted, as I would like to say. Final question, really quickly. How do you see halal stocks contributing to the legacy of the Muslim community, be it organizations, individuals, as a whole, say in the next 5 to 10 years? Like how do you see halal stocks being at the core of those things? If you can close off with that, inshallah.
The mission has always been to be the engine that drives the most worthwhile pursuits that are happening, right? Wealth is a force multiplier. It's what it is. And so if we can be the engine that drives, whether it's the Hajj fund in Malaysia or in other countries, if we're the engine that helps produce, a universal basic dividend, for example, that allows people to put their money to work, and we redistribute that to those who are the most needy, right? To
Yes.
elevate those people. If we can be the engine that helps fund more startups,
Yes.
right? Because you've got dry powder sitting there, needs to be liquid, but it only gets deployed slowly into the startup ecosystem. If you're a venture capital fund, an Islamic one. If we can be the engine behind that, if we can be the engine behind, zakat distribution,
Yeah.
right? With regards to helping those funds grow, and zakat being more efficient because we're paying less to the people who actually collect the zakat. That's covered by the
Yeah.
the earnings, and that means more zakat reaches more desperate people who
Yes.
actually need it more. I think like those are the impacts I hope that we can leave, and if it can be the engine for sadaqah jariyah, awqaf, and so
Yes.
on, then that's something, inshallah, that will outlast us.
Yes.
100 years, 200 years, 300 years, 500 years. The interesting thing about these kind of asset classes is when war happens, land is confiscated. That's why a lot of the awqaf, the waqfs that we had in the Muslim world, if you look in Syria, if you look in Lebanon, if you look in, Palestine, a lot of these were usurped because new rulers came in.
Yeah.
Right. So traditionally, the asset class for waqf was land, agricultural products, and so on, businesses, but brick and mortar businesses.
Yeah.
But now, if we're moving to the digital age and we've got now digital assets, it's much harder for those to be confiscated by a new power, a new war, and so on. You have mobility of wealth.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think we do need, and I hope HalalStocks can be part of that digitization and mobility of waqf assets that allows them to last 1,000 years. Because unfortunately, many of those old waqfs that were established by good people with good intentions, who gave so much in sadaqah, unfortunately came to an end because a new colonizing power came in.
Yeah.
And just, we're seeing this happening in India now. Seeing it happening in China, the confiscation of mosques and destruction of them and so on, which were waqfs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can imagine that there were waqfs in Gaza. They're gone, bro.
Yeah.
They destroyed all the mosques, the universities, the hospitals, everything. And that was someone's donation. That was someone's sadaqah jariyah.
Yeah.
Allah will give them the reward, but it's come to an end in this world.
Yes.
And so I think we also need to start looking at moving waqf assets, or having waqfs that are not just tied to physical land and property. We think it's safe, but if you're thinking centuries, right, then all bets are off, because empires fall, colonization is continuing, and we live in a world that's increasingly at conflict. So I think we need to also think about, if we're planning for 500 years, then the assets that we're investing our waqfs in have to be something that even outlast empires. And one of the ways to do that is to move it into the digital realm, so that it can be salvaged, even if someone else comes and takes over the land that you lived in, or you have to flee, like our grandparents had to do in India, right, and move to Pakistan. Those institutions that they built, they had to abandon. Whereas if you're in digital assets, or then you could have continued that waqf and continue to benefit from the proceeds of that. And so I think those are some concerns that we inshallah as HalalStocks can help to solve, and I pray that Allah accepts our intention, that we want the institutions and the solutions that we build to last centuries, if not millennia. That's the intention. Allah accept.
Ameen. And with that solid mic drop, inshallah, we'll call it a night. Then Rehan, many gems. May Allah accept from all of us.
Ameen.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. A friendly reminder: none of the information presented is to be considered financial advice. It is for educational and hopefully entertainment purposes only. Assalamu alaikum.